Brett and Heather, what should I be considering to understand the endocrinological implications of so-called top surgery on a young woman's long-term health? Thanks for what you do. Anchor of my week. It shouldn't matter much, but the person writing is at least using a male name. I don't know if it's just a question. It doesn't appear to be. Well, I don't know. I don't know what that means, actually.
Yeah, I don't know what it means either.
I don't know what that means. I don't have the the relevant half hour litany at the tip of my tongue here, but the fact is that healthy breasts are an important part of a healthy woman's body, and they change throughout life. They change with menses. They change, monthly with menses, and they change with pregnancy, and then they certainly change with lactation. I don't know, what simply getting rid of them early on is going to do. I know, for instance, and this is not an answer, but I feel like there's something in this thing I'm about to say that is going to that should have impact on the accurate answer here, which I don't have, which is that, for instance, women who breastfeed less or never in their lives are at higher risks of, I think it's just breast cancers, but it may be actually other cancers as well, other so-called reproductive cancers as well. And so, what would simply getting rid of those breasts, presumably before any breastfeeding happened, do to that analysis? I'm not sure. If it's just breast cancers, presumably it sort of takes care of the problem. But the fact is, this is not just... These aren't just balloons pasted to women's breasts. These are integral parts of the body that have feedback, and we don't really know what all the long-term effects are going to be.
All right, so I want to back the question up a little bit.
Okay.
Hormone is a molecule that triggers a physiological reaction at a distance. Right? So it's very much metabolically the same thing as a neurotransmitter, except over a long distance, right? The question really seems to be, are breasts producers of hormones that trigger other tissues? I find that likely, but I don't know it to be the case.
Right.
Or are they simply receptors? Breasts are certainly modified by hormonal information, right? So, for example, pregnancy triggers changes in breasts that are presumably at least partially mediated hormonally. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that they're generating hormones that are triggering other parts of the body, though that seems plausible to me.
Yeah, I feel like I should know the answer to that, but I just don't off the top of my head.
Right. So anyway, I think the answer is going to rest largely on that. Now, with respect to the issue of why not breastfeeding results in an increase in the risk of cancer, mm-hmm. I believe this is actually at least partially, maybe entirely, a telomere phenomenon. The idea being that that breasts under ancestral circumstances would have been heavily utilized in the feeding of babies and relatively early in a woman's life, and that the excess reproductive capacity of the cells in the breast tissue, basically being programmed for the ancestral load on breasts, constitutes extra cancer risk in the modern environment, especially if you do something like decide not to have children or use formula instead and therefore mm-hmm. reduce wear and tear.
Or even having kids later and breastfeeding and having fewer kids, like all of these are actually understood to have be correlated with some increased risk of cancers.
And for those who are longtime listeners to the podcast, the idea that even just having the same number of kids but delaying it and then breastfeeding them results in a residual risk fits exactly the paradigm that we see with respect to skin cancers and sun damage. The idea being that early mutations cause larger prototumors, which then have a greater statistical risk of some cell in the prototumor getting a second mutation that activates telomerase. And so that would be exactly predicted by this model.
Yep.